What is up, everybody, and welcome to episode 91 of the Trainer Scoop podcast. Really excited for today's podcast because we're going to talk about a highly underrated aspect of your fitness, and that is managing your mental health as well as all of the other variables that you hear us discussing here on the podcast. So I have a extremely, and I can't emphasize that enough, extremely well-credentialed and special guest joining me today. I have Dr. Jennifer Wright-Berryman here on the Trainer Scoop. Jennifer, say what's up to the people, and thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on.
Oh, I'm so grateful to be here with you, David, and I've been looking forward to it. To this conversation.
Yes, me too. This one's been a long time coming, and it's going to be a good one. So I want to tell the people a little bit about you as we're starting off. So I have some effects set up here with my podcast, and this is going to tell them all about you. So Dr. Wright-Berryman is an associate professor of social work at the University of Cincinnati. She is a mental health scholar with 25 years of experience in the mental health and suicide prevention fields. She's spoken nationally on the subjects, and not to be left out, my girlfriend's amazing mother. So you've all
Aw.
seen Danny on the podcast and on the socials. This is where it all comes from, and I just can't express enough the quality of the guest today. So I hope you all enjoy the podcast.
I appreciate the kudos.
But I'm really interested to hear, kind of like as we're starting off, like your experience and intro to the whole fitness things, because y'all know I have experts on the podcast, but they walk the walk and talk the talk. Jennifer, I see her in the gym a couple times a week. She's out there doing the thing, as well as her credentialed realm of experience. She's an avid gym goer as well. So how did that all start off for you?
Well, I was one of those kids who always struggled, with my weight around puberty, and I just found it was so easy to put it on and so hard to take it off. And then, as a young adult in college, I really started losing weight and hitting the gym hard. But I had no idea what I was doing. I just kind of got some cardio and lifted some weights, but I didn't really have any sort of routine. And then as, in my late 20s, early 30s, I started having children, which piles the pounds on, for someone who isn't being really aware.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of let myself go in my 30s, and really was not focused at all on my health or my weight or my body. And I hit the age of 38, 39, and I was a good 75 pounds, 80 pounds overweight. And I felt terrible, of course. My father died of heart disease when he was 51.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that if I did not take care of my body, that I, could end up, in early death. It was just a reality that I had to accept. So at the age of 39, I decided by the time I turned 40, I'm going to lose the weight and I'm going to get healthy and I'm going to do it the right way. So I did this. That was 2014.
Mm-hmm.
2012. I was 39 in 2012. I had to do the math there. And I took a whole year. I gave myself an entire year. I didn't want to feel like I was on some fad diet plan. I just followed a really sort of basic nutritional plan with a nutritionist, a dietitian, actually.
Nice. How did you
And
get linked up with a dietitian?
well, I've worked in a university setting.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, our nutritional sciences department is in my college, so
Cool.
I was always surrounded by some good people to consult.
Yeah. Did they take you through the gambit of like DEXA scans and like all of the fun toys that they have, or was it mostly like, hey, here's the
It
information, go
it
apply it?
was really me just it was really just a lot of conversations
Yeah.
and making some good choices. In fact, the former chair of our nutritional sciences department and I had gone on to a conference together at the University of Michigan, and I had
Mhm.
her as a roommate while we were at the
Yeah.
conference. So I just was really fortunate to be able to have those conversations and do. I kind of did a mishmash of things that worked for me.
Mhm.
I didn't follow one specific, diet or nutritional plan. My heart tests were all good.
Mhm.
I was generally I was, organs were healthy. There was no reason for me to, do the Mediterranean diet or do the salt
Mhm.
diet or, just, it was just, um, very specific choices and moderation and just some things like that. But then I
Mhm.
started hitting the gym. I worked with a trainer on and off that year. And he was really patient with me. But I think all of you trainers have to be patient because, as I'm sure we'll get into today, there's so much self criticism and self doubt. I think, especially when you're really, really heavy,
Mhm.
uh, just getting started is a huge win. And I realized, interestingly, there was a friend of mine who was also significantly overweight, and we took two different paths. I really fell in love with lifting weights, and she fell in love with running. And when I ran, it was always just short distances for cardio. It was never for, I would never intended to be a marathoner or anything like
Mhm.
that. But she did. She started running marathons, and she lost her weight that way. And our bodies were different, of course, and she saw different results that she didn't love. But I found that by lifting weights, it actually sort of tightened things up. So I had a different result as well. But
Yeah.
uh, that was, 10, 11, 12 years ago after I lost all the weight. And
Mhm.
for me, gym is just, gym and lifting is just part of my life now. It's fully integrated.
Yep.
Of course, there are times when there are breaks for various reasons, but it is never anything that I've um, discontinued for any length of time. So
Yeah.
that's my journey. Yeah.
Very cool. Now, I think to nerd out on the people real quick, there's I mean, just one of the basic kind of models that I learned, the trans theoretical model of change. But yeah,
Of
like working with
course I
people.
am.
Yeah, this is right up your alley, right?
Mhm.
Working with the people, to get them in that maintenance phase is always like the goal as a trainer, right? Because wanting to get people in a self-sustainable part of life where like you said, like integrate the gym into your life, and it's like something that you just do out of habit. So before we delve deep into the mental health side, I'm just really impressed that you took this upon yourself with all the busyness of life. So that was, like 2012. Danny was like a young teen. Your other child, Trevor, like entering his teenage years. So there's just so much going on. Like, how did you do it? And we have the different stages. Like maybe in your earlier 30s, that pre-contemplation where it's just like, hey, I have to work. I have to take care of these kids. It's not really at the forefront. But then eventually shifting through this model, I think it is a good model. This is one that I graduated 6 years ago, and I still think about it every week. So yeah, like how did you do it? What are some good tips for the people out there that might be in a similar circumstance?
Uh, there are, um, first of all, I want to say the stages of change model is the cornerstone of a lot of the work that I do. So I'm glad that you shared this. It is um, not a linear model. I think that people should be aware that sometimes we slip back into,
Mm-hmm.
you know, contemplation. Um, Sometimes we slip back into phases. And I think one of the things we might touch on today is sort of that shame like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, I've gained 5 or 10 pounds back, or I've lost some body mass. I'm not as bulky as I used to be, or I'm having to reduce some things or change some things. So over my personal journey, I've had to practice a great deal of acceptance and self-love when things haven't been working well. So when my children um, were younger, one of the things that I kept in the very front of my mind is that I'm setting an example for them as much
Mhm.
as possible, that they see me, pack my gym bag, right? Or they know that I've been to the gym, and there was actually a point, I don't know if Danny has shared this with you, but there was a point at which she was a little concerned about about me.
Yeah, she did tell
And
me that. She was like, "I had to sit her
yeah,
down, have an intervention." She said we needed some snacks
yeah.
in this house.
Yeah. There was a time at which where I think I did lose some balance, right? So
Mhm.
I was in the gym a lot, and I think part of that is because you start to feel so good about yourself, both psychologically and physically, that it
Mhm.
does become addictive. And so people can certainly lose sight of, that balance.
Mhm.
Um, and Daniela did, I think she also wrote me a letter. I think I
Yeah,
still
yeah.
have. She wrote me a letter and she's like, Mom, I understand the gym's important. But, and then the other thing too is just, I remember reading to Trevor. Um, we were doing bedtime reading, and he made oh gosh, he was probably only 5, 6, 7 years old, and he just said something about, you know, "Mom, you seem happier," right? And I said, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Well," I think he was trying at that young age to not, like, upset me, but what he was saying was, "You used to be fat, and now you're not fat anymore." And
Yeah.
and, you know and, I could shoot hoops with Trevor,
Mhm.
and, do things with my body that I couldn't do comfortably before.
Mhm.
And those things kept me motivated to stay at it.
Mhm.
Even when I found myself in a slump, I didn't look to the gym to be my motivation. I think
Mhm.
sometimes when we lose motivation, we're like, oh, if I can just drag myself to the gym and see other people working out, that's going to motivate me. I think
Mhm.
our motivation has to come from our own life,
Yeah.
and those gains that we make that may not show a larger muscle, but may actually show um, in our daily life, just the small things that we take for granted, like
Mhm.
carrying all those groceries in, or carrying
Mhm.
that cooler, or as you are very familiar, moving and being
Yeah.
able to carry all that stuff when you're moving. So,
Yep.
um, just having a body that works for you. And as I
Mhm.
age, the how it works changes,
Yeah.
and I have to be patient and really accept what my body can do,
Mhm.
as opposed to criticizing my body for what it can't do. I think we fall into that trap as well sometimes. It's like, "Oh, I can't do what I see so and so doing in the gym," or "I can't, you know, run like that anymore. I've had, knee problems.
Mhm.
I've had um recently some sort of neck and shoulder problems, and so I have to, when we modify our routines and modify our workouts, I think we have to continually accept what our bodies can do
Mhm.
instead of criticizing, like I said, what our bodies can't do. And I think that's part of the mental health too of, exercise and fitness and lifting and, you know,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely like a couple things that just to kind of take the things that you said and provide some real world examples like you mentioned, such a good point that I think I forget to mention with people too is like the model of change here, it's not linear. So you're going to see some progression and regression just like your fitness, right? You're not always going to see positive weight loss forever. There's going to be ups and downs. So I really like that you made that point, and kind of like the two things that I think, as you're working through this to get to a place where you're a sustainable gym goer and seeing all those results that you want, like showing yourself some grace and self-love, like accepting that spot that you're at. It might not be perfect. It might not be like what you're seeing other people do on social media, but like, hey, you're making that effort and you're going to get where you're going as long as you're consistent. I really like that point of like showing yourself some self-love and, that kind of like intrinsic motivation. So for you, it was like, oh, like doing those fun things with the kids, it meant a lot to you. So if people can find, maybe you don't have kids, maybe you do, but something that really has a deep meaning personally to you as that intrinsic motivator, because there's intrinsic and extrinsic. Extrinsic
Mhm.
might be like what you see that person with the rockin' bot on social media, or you see like one of your friends that's crushing it. That's kind of like, those are that more like fleeting motivation when it really comes down to it. You're like, whatever, like it might not always keep you bound to the goal. But if you have like an intrinsic, something that's like really personally motivating, that's when I see people having like good success with sticking to the process. So yeah, I really, really like those points. And we'll minimize the stages of change for now as we move on. But yeah, I'm glad we covered that
Can I
impromptu. Yeah.
can I touch on something you just said that I wanted I had it in my mind, and this is sort of a perfect, you know, building on what you said about that extrinsic motivation and seeing, bodies or pictures of
Mhm.
people lifting or doing other things on social media that kind of motivate you. I think that it can help and it can work, but I also wonder if we ourselves can become our own extrinsic motivation.
Mhm.
So you probably remember or you've seen, like, for example, Weight Watchers commercials, or oh, actually, it's on, like on Reels. You'll see people. I've seen. Maybe I click on them, and this is why they keep popping up. But like
Mhm.
people who either actually do lose weight, and they show pictures of themselves, or there's a reel of themselves at 300 pounds or whatever, and then you see them now at, like, 145.
Mhm.
And to me, you know, we should be visually documenting our own journey.
Mhm.
So instead of, it is inspirational when we see someone gain muscle, run farther, lift heavier, or lose weight. But we also need to make sure that for ourselves, you know, the pictures of those before pictures of us, I think, are really important. So recently, as you know, we moved. I was looking through some old pictures, as I was opening boxes I hadn't opened in years. And
Mhm.
I saw pictures of myself at that time when I was 38 years old or 35 years old. And I had all that weight on my body that I was carrying around. And there was just this sense of, wow, you know, how far I've come. So I think
Mhm.
sometimes, um, we can see things on social media that can be motivating, but I also think it's really important for us to stay in tune with our own journey and not lose
Mhm.
sight of our personal best or our personal gains versus, in other words, achieving a balance of where we get that extrinsic motivation
Yeah.
is kind of what I'm, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like when it comes to documenting your progress, like it is one of the most rewarding things to see. And for me, I'm trying to think back, like when I was like before I started getting into the gym when I was 16, like I just didn't like getting my picture taken because I was just so not comfortable with the way that I looked. But if you're starting off, it's going to be uncomfortable. But I always, in hindsight, I'm like, man, I wish I had more pictures because like I'll try to put together a piece of content or just like showing somebody like, yeah, this is where I started, this is where I am now, and I just have so few things to draw from. It's really important to do, and it will keep reinforcing those positive habits as long as you're sticking with it. There's like hardly anything more rewarding to see that progress. Yeah, it's a good point. So as we're transitioning into the mental health side of things, if we could almost just kind of like start off by establishing like a framework of whether it be literature, like proven studies that you're familiar with, or just kind of like your anecdotal meta-analysis of how mental health and fitness kind of how they can correlate, how they benefit, or how being active and fit can benefit your mental health. I'm very interested. If you do you have any information like that, or just any general things that you keep in mind?
Well, there is some pretty well known research around the impact of moving your body and getting exercise and depression and anxiety. I think there's a few reasons for that. First of all, is just the chemical reaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we are increasing our neurotransmitters that um, for example, in depression, we have lack of access to serotonin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there are other neurochemicals that are involved with depression, anxiety, and some other mental health disorders
Mm-hmm.
um, that can change when we, exercise. And so physiologically, those changes, if we keep them up and we're consistent, we may start to see a more persistent reduction in depression and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a cure, obviously. It's something that, certainly can help in combination with other things that you're doing to care for your mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So on a physiological side, there's a lot of established studies that go back a long time. Also self-perception, right?
Mm-hmm.
So um, when when people are depressed, the your self-perception starts to take over.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't see the world clearly. You see yourself and a lot of those sort of negative, um, the negativity that tends to overwhelm us when we're depressed, and those messages, um, they kind of block out anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So when we start to get into our bodies more, whether it's through walking, just getting out into the world and walking,
Mm-hmm.
breathing, um, if we are lifting weights or doing other things that we start to see changes in our body, then that forces the focus from negative into something, more positive.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish that physicians, so a lot of people will go to their primary care physician when they suspect that they're suffering from depression or anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And generally they do so because, they know a doctor will prescribe them medications or tell them to go see a mental health therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I really, really wish that doctors would start prescribing um, body movement.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the reason I use the phrase body movement is because I want to be inclusive of all people who have a range of abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be that, someone is uses a wheelchair, or someone is 92 years old, or someone is, just to be inclusive of a range of, abilities. I think intentionally moving one's body means that you're getting up from your chair or your seat, and you might be just taking a few extra steps around your house, whatever it is, to start moving your body with intention.
Mm-hmm.
And then noticing what your body can do. I just can't say that enough. Is that we just take for granted that we can put one foot in front of the other, or that we can, do something, lift heavier. And I think noticing what your body can do and taking a moment to really tell yourself, "Look what I just did," and not taking that for granted anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that really, um, I think that intentionality can really start to ward off those negative messages that I can't do this, or I'm terrible at this, or or I'm ashamed of my body, or I'm ashamed of myself. Um, and anyway, so I'm sort of rambling now, but
Oh,
I
good
think
stuff.
that from the fitness standpoint, we need to notice more. We need to have a heightened awareness of what our body can do.
Hmm.
On the mental health side of things, I think that we have to start getting away from, this sort of medication, and that just medication and just mental health therapy it's like a two-part system. We really have to get away from that. We really do have to start prescribing movement. We have to start prescribing, um, you know, I don't want to necessarily say it's all about cardio or weightlifting. I want to
Hmm.
say that anything that is fitness related, we have to redefine what that is for mental health. And I think we need to start sort of prescribing movement for mental health.
Yeah.
And then that prescription needs to be person centered.
Hmm.
So, what is it that a person's body can do, and what can we prescribe as a daily routine? And it almost bridges to me, it's almost like physical therapy for our mental health in a way. So it's sort of
Yeah.
like bringing those two disciplines together,
Hmm.
in a new way, where we're actually, if you go to the doctor for your mental health, they're going to be like, okay, here's a prescription for, you know, your depression, or a prescription for anxiety, and I recommend you go see a mental health therapist. I would like to see more holistic application of movement, for our mental health. I think that'll revolutionize how we address our mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's super important to cover that stuff because it's like, fitness and mental health, it's just such a buzzword topic that people hear so much these days, but like actually understanding how they integrate. And so really important to note that it's both a neurochemical, so very important in just the way that your mental health is working kind of under the hood, and then also kind of like the things that you might notice, more in the day to day, like you said, increasing your confidence, being able to kind of like stack the wins and feeling of achievement and like capability of your, I guess, kind of like, I don't know, Danny roasted me on incorrectly using this, but would you say locus of control might be applicable here? Like just understanding that the things that you do can kind of increase your overall ability to take control and have ownership over some of your outcomes, and feeling accomplished. Is that apt here?
I do think so, because one of the things when I was preparing to talk with you, one of the things that I wanted to mention, and this kind of goes along with, your locus of control, because when we feel out of control, that's when anxiety especially starts to
Hmm.
set in,
Hmm.
right? But I do think there is a giving up of control,
Yeah.
and noticing, once again, I use noticing a lot in my work. We are so busy, and social media grabs our attention so much, other things grab our attention so much, to just stop and notice. So that goes along with locus of control, because let's say at the gym, I'm on the bench, and I don't know, let's just pick something simple. I'm doing arm curls or something, right? Like, how much am I actually watching that movement, right? I've been doing this movement for now 13 years, right? If I stop and really notice that movement and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm lifting this weight. I think you know, uh, you know, complete a set, and then I'm moving on,
Hmm.
and it becomes routine." And so I think that when we really stop and notice what our bodies can do, and allow ourselves to be filled with awe and wonder that we can do that, instead of continually taking it for granted, it renews our sense of, it- you know, it renews our sense of self-control. So I think there is both a locus of control where we can work toward outcomes and, maintain a routine and really get settled into and growth mindset. But I think at the same time, there needs to be a little bit of a giving up of control, and really allowing ourselves the freedom to, notice what a small gain is,
Mm-hmm.
or not lose some rigidity.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the questions I wanted to ask you, that comes up for me sometimes when I'm having to modify my workouts is, how do we define a gain?
Mm-hmm.
And is a gain, a difference in my body? Is a gain the fact that I've moved up in weight? Is a gain that something has become easier, so I need to, increase my resistance? What is a gain? And how do we personalize when you're doing personal training? How do you personalize gains for individuals so that we can notice
Mm-hmm.
the gain, um, and that our reward system? So when we're talking about depression, especially, um, our reward system is so personal to us that I think we have to, communicate with trainers or communicate with our workout buddies or whoever we're, collaborating with in this space of fitness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think we have to be pretty discreet. And by discreet, I don't mean like secret or private. Discreet means that we have to break it down in such small parts, that we are noticing micro gains and having and tripping our reward system, in such a way that we understand that growth mindset isn't about the big gains, or I'm now lifting this when, last month I was lifting this, or I can do this movement.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's even smaller than that. And so, I do think, there is, again, like you said, this locus of control where, we can, work toward these outcomes and see these outcomes happen. But I also think that, freedom of control means that we're allowing ourselves to really celebrate the very tiny things,
Mm-hmm.
the tiny gains, and redefining what gain means for, our personal best, and allowing that to change a little bit and allowing
Mm-hmm.
some flexibility and fluctuation.
Yeah. No, I'm really glad you brought that up. And I'll tell you how I think about it and then provide you like a context specific example of one of probably my most advanced client named Brandon. I'll have to send him this part of the podcast. So yeah, as trainers and, the most intuitive things, which are more objective, like the number on the scale, the weight that you're lifting, the measurement of your waist. So those are the things that, kind of pretty common sense. People get it and they integrate it. But I think if you could dig a little deeper and consider some of those subjective gains as well, like that's when you can, like you said, like have that freedom to, maybe not so rigorously get tied to those objective metrics, which sometimes you just don't have control over. And that's why I think the freedom that you mentioned is super important for people to consider so they don't get discouraged. In the example of my client Brandon, like we had a goal, he wants to get up to 240, like low 230s. And the goal for him is just to get bigger so we can do a bodybuilding show and place well. So in terms of like what can we do for progression, obviously he has this weight gain goal, but he switched areas. He works at like Honda in the manufacturing plant. So getting like 20,000 steps a day, sweating all day, that can be really discouraging for him because, like he's doing everything right. He eats like 6,500 calories a day, which is just such a chore in itself. Hits the gym 5 times a week. It's pretty discouraging to see that scale hasn't moved in the direction that he wants to. But I think other things that can just, you can celebrate those wins, feel that freedom, and then, yeah, like see some progression in the other areas is like like you said, like the perceptive feeling of like how hard an exercise is. So like maybe, I'm having him do like a bench press, 275 pounds. He did 10 reps the first week. And now in the fifth week, it's like, wow, that was actually pretty easy. Like we can definitely go up in weight. So there's those, like, hey, the perception of this, I've gotten stronger. There's a technical component where it's like, hey, my form is so much better than it used to be. Like I'm executing this movement in such a way that it's like, safer. I'm hitting the muscle better. So there's like the technique component. There's one other that came to my mind as you were talking that I'm sure will come back up. But yeah, like it's a great thing. Like progress has many forms. It's not always just those objective kind of intuitive, like, oh yeah, like these are the things that people track. There's much more that comes to it. Yeah, I think like perception of effort, form, those other things are important to keep track of too, so you don't get too discouraged. Because like in the case of Brandon, there's like the mental, like managing that mental health component, managing that little voice in your head that's telling you like, oh, like you're not progressing the way you should be. Like it's not worth it. Like it can be very tough, whether your goal is weight gain, weight loss, like managing the mental health through those ups and downs. It can be tricky, and it can honestly just cause a lot of issues for people. So what are your thoughts there? Like, what are some strategies that people can integrate to manage the mental health and avoid the plethora of things that can come up and get in the way?
Yeah, let's kind of define emotional health. I love to use the phrase emotional health. I think mental health has become buzzy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of um, pigeonholing, and self-diagnosing that happens
Yeah.
these days. I
Yeah.
think especially because of social media. So I like to talk about emotional health and think of it as this, landscape of feelings. So for someone like Brandon, it could be just something like disappointment, discouragement, frustration, being perturbed that, I weigh 2 pounds less today than I did yesterday, and it's all
Mm-hmm.
water, that he's lost. Or, um, you know, it's when those feelings persist. So when the discouragement and the disappointment and the frustration and the perturbation persist and become, when they overshadow the emotional gains that you're making by, if you do make progress. So like if progress is happening, but it starts to feel like meaningless, or it's diluted by, you know, the persistence of feeling discouraged or disappointed. This is when we should really start to take note of a person's, mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So I think emotional health is all the normal, natural feelings that we have: frustration, disappointment, and those things pass, you know. And it's when things don't pass that I think we're starting to talk about mental health. That's when we're
Mm-hmm.
starting to talk about, when is my discouragement, my frustration, and my perturbation tripping into, possibly dysphoria
Yeah.
or even depression. Um,
I'm glad you said that
and
because, yeah, like you said, like with just kind of the buzzword that social media has on some of these terms, like how many times have you heard someone say like, "Oh, I have anxiety"? It's like, do you have like clinical anxiety, or are you just like feeling a little anxious or like a little nervous about
right,
like, the time?
right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I think that back in the olden days, I've been a clinician, a mental health clinician, researcher for a long, long time. So, of course, I remember practicing before we had social media.
Hmm.
I practiced before we had the internet. So, um, and, people didn't know, couldn't interpret their feelings,
Yeah.
right? So, in therapy, we would try to give people a broader language to describe, like emotional health literacy or mental health
Hmm.
literacy, because there is a huge chasm between someone who has major recurring or persistent depression or anxiety, and someone who has challenges overcoming overwhelming feelings, right?
Mhm.
So you, it is very natural to feel overwhelmed and discouraged and upset and afraid. Those are normal, natural things that you should feel. It's when you don't have any skills to overcome those feelings and they persist and you're losing sleep. So, where we should be concerned is when our functioning starts to decline because of our feelings and emotions.
Yeah.
So, if the people that you're coaching or training, or that your colleagues or collaborators are coaching or training, when they start to notice someone consistently dragging into the gym and their eyes are red and puffy, and you notice that they are exceptionally thin or they've gained a lot of weight in a short period of time, and they become more ambivalent about training. They're there for the wrong reasons. They're there because you expect them to be there, not because they um, are intrinsically motivated, right?
Mhm.
And the extrinsic motivation of just showing up for your coach or your trainer, um, you're not going to make, you're not going to make those personal gains. Those
Yeah.
intrinsic motivators are going to be lost. So,
Mhm.
um, I think that coaches and trainers, or even, workout buddies, um, there is a support system there. I mean, I've always gone to a gym. I've never been a home worker outer, like yoga, I'll do at home or something, but I've always been someone that's gone somewhere
Yeah.
because that sense of belongingness, even though you don't know all the names of all the people at your gym, you walk into the gym and someone greets you, and it's generally with a smile or they say hi. And you do eventually meet people at the gym and you might smile, but there's a sense of community at a gym.
Mhm.
And I think that is sometimes what brings people back to the gym when they're not feeling like showing up.
Yeah, definitely.
And so noticing each other and noticing when someone's not there, noticing the change in functioning. I think all of those are signals and
Mhm.
flags that we should start asking different questions. So, coaches, trainers, workout buddies, workout friends, or just people at the gym, um, I think it's important to say, let's not let's take a few moments to talk about your mental health. And it takes courage to ask those questions.
Mhm.
When you're someone who trains someone's physical body as opposed to training their emotional health or their mental health, their psyche, um, it may be difficult to ask those questions to say, you know, are you okay? How are you feeling emotionally today? Um, you know, what barriers are you experiencing emotionally or mentally that might be impacting, your training?
Mhm.
And what can we do to sort of like support you in resolving those? I
Yeah.
think phrasing it that way, I don't think coaches and trainers should take responsibility for being they're not a mental health practitioner, but support systems just go a long way.
Mhm.
I also think there's a healthy level of disclosure. So if a trainer or a coach or a workout partner have overcome their own barriers, storytelling is really powerful. How have you overcome your own mental health challenges along the way?
Mhm.
How did you push through? I don't know if you've ever read Grit by Angela Duckworth.
I haven't. No,
um,
I know that
uh,
I'm familiar, but I have not read it.
yeah, it's a great book. I mean, she was a MacArthur fellow, and she studied this idea of grit and perseverance,
Mhm.
which she did a study at West Point, and she looked at those who dropped out versus those who stayed in, and it wasn't about some of the things you might think it's about, right? It's not
Mhm.
about who was um, the best student or the fastest, runner during PT or,
Mhm.
it was really just about this level of grit and, perseverance
Mhm.
and, what we might call white knuckling it or just, holding on through
Mhm.
the really tough times. Um, you may have people that you're training that are going through some really tough personal stuff.
Mhm.
Um, it could be that you're training someone who lost a parent or lost a child or lost, it could be grief. I mean, there's just so many things that people deal with in their daily lives that can take a chunk out of them.
Mhm.
Um, and so it may be that coaches and trainers and workout partners are in a unique position to provide um, a level of support that doesn't have to trip over into the unprofessional. It can stay
Mhm.
professional, but it's a standpoint that you're coming from where you say, I care about the whole you, not just the physical you or the developing your physical routine. It's also about I care about your mental and emotional wellness,
Mhm.
and what does that look like for you, and how can we even modify your training to accommodate the fact that you are distracted with your grief or your mental health or what you've got going on,
Mhm.
or how can we modify your routine to improve your how you feel mentally today.
Mhm.
And this is research that I'm not familiar with, but are there muscle groups that are more have a more direct impact on um the mind?
Yeah.
um is it that I feel better emotionally after a leg day? Or, I mean, like, I
Mhm.
don't know. That's something I would like to try and
Mhm.
see. Are there, when we are feeling especially low and we go in to the gym and it's supposed to be an excruciating workout day, is that actually gonna, hi kitty, is that gonna make me feel better or worse?
Mhm.
It might make me feel better, right? If I put my body through the ringer, maybe my sense of accomplishment at the end of the day. But I do think that there is a personal prescription probably there
Yeah.
for every person. Is pushing myself through an excruciating workout going to improve my mood? I do know, and I'm sure you do as well, that one of the primary mechanisms that we cope with anxiety, for example, is distraction,
Mhm.
keeping ourselves suspended away from the thing that causes our anxiety. Workouts are a great prescription for distraction. A
Mhm.
lot of us work out to music, right? So not only do you have like your earbuds in and you are listening to your music, but you are putting your body through something rigorous. Your mind can't do all that at the same. It can't be anxious
Mhm.
and listen to music and go through a rigorous workout. It can only do the music and the workout, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, getting back to the very beginning of this conversation where I'm talking about we really need to prescribe these sorts of things for people with, existing mental health concerns.
Mhm.
I think that one barrier, though, and you probably know how this works for people, is, you know, time. You talked about me when my kids were little. How did I do it? I talked about extrinsic motivations, but honestly, when I started my academic career, I went to the gym at 5:30 in the morning, and it stunk.
Mhm.
It was really I hated 5:30 in the morning, and I don't have to do that anymore, and I'm very fortunate to not have to do that anymore. But there are barriers for people, and that contributes to their depression, anxiety. It's like maybe people want to get fit.
Mhm.
Maybe they want to have, you know, uh, maybe they want to lose weight. Maybe they want to get healthy, but they can't afford to go to the gym,
Yeah.
or they don't have, so what can we do at home? What are
Mhm.
some things people can do at home? Moving your body is always a possibility for somebody, but we
Mhm.
may just have to really redefine what that looks like for some people, especially people with depression who just do not want to leave the house. They want to, maybe they're, so are there workouts for depression? Like, I haven't done that research. So that might be something interesting to look into.
Hmm.
How do we take day one, day two, right? Day one is we get out of bed and we do, you know, something right beside the bed, right? So whether you set a few light weights by the bed or something like that, right? And then day two looks like this. We step out of the bedroom into the living room,
Hmm.
right? And we do more, maybe we do some, some push-ups or some, something, right? So if you can see what I'm saying, when we talk about progress, we talk about mental health, we
Hmm.
talk about modification, and we talk about, personal gains. It's really tailoring that coaching to so if someone accesses you through your website or through your app and says, I have severe depression, I can barely get out of bed, but I'm interested in doing something with my body, what does that look like for someone like me?
Yeah.
And I think it's thinking creatively as a trainer and a coach, about gym provides a sense of place for those of us who go to the gym, but how do we redefine a sense of place for someone who literally struggles to get out of bed in the morning?
Yeah.
And how do we incorporate fitness goals into those very small sort of units of progress, even if it's
Hmm.
just getting out of the bed and doing some bends, or
Right.
doing some lifts. So
Yeah, I think like especially with the different examples you provided, just like finding like that basis point and being able to recognize that progress and success, it's really really beneficial. And kind of like on a similar example for someone that might be more kind of confined to or constrained to like a home setting, when you and Daniela were at your Florida trip in April, I went and visited one of my friends from high school he has a 3-year-old daughter. It was like moving into a new home. They've since had their second baby, but his wife was like 8 months pregnant at the time. Um, like he was just like in between setting stuff up from his house, playing with his daughter, like hanging out with me and my other friend that went to visit him. He was like doing air squats and like sit-ups. And I'm like, man, like that's so cool that you're still like making the effort to do this, because like you might just kind of get bogged down in like the busyness of life, or maybe that looks different for people that might be depressed. Like you have some other things to contend with that are kind of like taking you out of maybe your typical routine. But yeah, like just doing those little things, I thought it was like so cool that he was still making that effort. He's like, I just won't get it in elsewise. And yeah, I think like having those little things, little wins, like you mentioned, maybe it's just like getting out of bed one day. Maybe the next day you're getting out of bed, doing some mobility, some bends, some stretches, some body weight, push-ups or squats or something. Like it can really help massively in the long term. So I think that's a good thing to bring up.
if I could just touch on that, just add something else into it. You know, Coaching and training, um, have an opportunity, coaches and trainers have an opportunity to teach how to self celebrate.
Hmm.
So, and how to notice and outside of the gym. So, your friend says, I'm going to do this right here, right now, because that's when I'm going to get it in. Right.
Hmm.
And, you know, stopping and noticing that you did take the time to do that. Right. This probably sounds silly, but it's whatever. So, when I first started working out, one of the things that I did very intentionally, that to this day I still do intentionally, is climb staircases with intention.
Hmm.
So when I start to climb the stairs, I'm like, I have the opportunity to like push up a little bit, work my calves,
Hmm.
I have, and then I can tuck in, there are things that like just climbing the stairs is such a routine thing. And at your home, if you have stairs in your home or at work or whatever. And, a lot of people will take the stairs instead of taking an elevator, you know, and those choices are things that can be incorporated into your wellness routine. There's this old joke about people who try to to get the closest parking spot at the gym instead of, it's like you're going into the gym, but yet you're fighting for that closest parking spot instead of like parking way out in the parking lot, so that you're actually getting a little steps when you walk into the gym.
Sounds like
And
Danny
so,
when she goes to the gym at 5:30 p.m.
oh yeah, for sure. I know.
Nothing
The
there.
parking lot at our gym is just like, yeah, not ideal. But I think it's I think for people, especially who, when they're not in the gym are, or have those barriers, I think we can do sort of daily life wellness goals that are outside of the gym, and
Mhm.
then train people to notice that they accomplish those and to self celebrate. I think for people who, are either already into fitness and they're starting to suffer emotionally, I think they need to learn how to self-celebrate outside of the gym, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking a lot about gains and progress in the gym. For someone like Brandon, who gets frustrated because, he's working on a factory floor, he's losing weight, he wants to be gaining weight, so, he's probably spends his time either at work or in the gym, right? So is he celebrating sleep? Is he celebrating, making his calorie goal? Is he celebrating, I mean, like, what are some things that we're not in tune to that are outside of the gym that we could
Mhm.
be celebrating? For that person who just got out of bed, that's a small celebration. So, like, micro gains, micro celebrations,
Mhm.
and making celebration a routine, part of the routine, because acceptance and self love then have a foundation.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I
think
think
it's
those
like
things are important.
definitely it's like sneakily important because and I'm sure as you've seen many times, maybe even felt it yourself. I know I definitely have like there can be some nasty, nasty little things that creep in when you start to get consistent. Maybe you get addicted to the gym. Maybe you get weird feelings around food, which can even transcend into like an eating disorder.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for, considering like, hey, like let's celebrate these wins and just kind of keep morale high and keep that like just the understanding of like, hey, this is what I'm progressing. Like stuff is moving in the right direction. If you don't celebrate those wins, it can take a nasty turn on you, which that might be a discussion for a whole other podcast. The managing some of the
Yeah.
mental health effects that can come from you know being very attentive of your fitness and your nutrition. That's like another sphere that we should talk about soon. But yeah, I think there's something to be said for celebrating those wins. And then one thing that kind of like came to mind is as you were talking about earlier that I wanted to mention is like whether if you're working with a coach or a workout partner, like acknowledging the difficulties that you might be going through and how that can affect your workouts. And I think like if you don't have a support system like that, just taking some time to do some breath work, maybe before you go to the gym, really is a great way to clear your head and kind of like just center yourself in your body so that you can actually have a good workout and not be so like focused on some of the things that might be troubling you. And like you said, just to tie back in with like, hey, like this is a good way to focus your thoughts on like the tangible actions that you're taking to improve your life. I think the breath work can kind of help set the stage for that if you don't have a great support system. Because I always skew these things towards like working with the trainer or coach, but I know not everybody has that. Like everybody has a wide variety of things available to them. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that as well. I think it can be a good strategy.
Well, you know what that makes me think of is, our brain is obviously an organ, but let's just think of it as a muscle for a second, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what what workouts for our minds can we be doing? So you mentioned breath work, which I think is excellent because,
Mm-hmm.
therapy 101, right?
Mm-hmm.
Breathe
Yeah.
in for 4 count, let out for 6 count, right? And when we're talking about anxiety, for example, breath work is really important. And, you don't just breathe in for 4 and breathe out for 6 once, right? You might do it 10 times, but essentially you do it at a level where the anxiety no longer has power over you, right? So it is both the cleansing, right, of the actual breathing, but it's also, again, as we talked about earlier, a distraction. So there are things that, and this is circling all the way back to sort of your first question, but there are things that we can, that trainers and coaches and fitness folks can do to, distract minds with bodies, with body work, but also what are some ways that we can sort of exercise our minds, right? Like
Mhm.
fitness up our mind. And um, those things are very, very difficult to do. So working out our mind is something that we have to, well, it's really no more difficult than our physical activity. It just takes that same level of dedication and commitment.
Mhm.
So exercising our mind might be um, intentionally focusing on positive things and intentionally weeding out the negativity.
Mhm.
Danielle and I talk a lot about the impact of social media on our minds, right? And so, um, how do we incorporate positive social media use versus the stuff that poisons our mind?
Mhm.
How do we flex our mind muscles um, by intentionally seeking out, you know, positive, heavy mental lifts, you know,
Yeah.
and frequency and commitment to consistency, and whether that is setting. So for workouts, generally we have a routine, right? We know it's leg day. We're gonna go in. This is the stuff we're gonna do. That same intentionality and commitment we should use for our minds. Could you imagine how much healthier our minds would be if we had that same level of commitment to mind work as opposed
Mhm.
to just body work?
Mhm.
And sometimes that, people don't have coping skills, coping mechanisms, or it's just like not knowing what to do if you're the first, you step into the gym for the first time, you look at all this equipment, you look at all this stuff, and you're like, I don't know what to do with that. And
Yeah.
you don't know how to do it correctly. Um, and so I think that one of the things that we need to do is to make mind work more accessible to people.
Mhm.
That accessibility to the gym their barriers could be time and money. Um, for mind work, it's knowledge and, commitment.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to kind of draw some parallels between um, some of the challenges and solutions to working out your body are the same to working out, your mind, that there are things, society rewards a nice body if
Mhm.
we're just going to be, and, Danielle and I talk a lot about, oh gosh, look at that person, on social media who looks so good, and society expects me to look that way.
Mhm.
And for me, there's this podcast called the Feelings Lab,
Mhm.
and they are feelings researchers, right?
Mhm.
And one of the episodes, and I've talked about this in my Substack, one of the episodes is about wonder and awe,
Mhm.
right? And so if I do the same level of, if I'm committed and work out at the same level as someone else, but my muscles don't look as big, or my triceps aren't as defined as hers, or whatever,
Mhm.
that comparison is, you know going to make me regress
Mhm.
in my mental health. If I just But if I use myself, if my tricep, if something on my body looks one way, you know 2 weeks ago it looks differently and better, that's what I should be focused on.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm saying that in the same thing in just a different way, but yeah, so I think part of working on our mental health is commitment to the things that are healthy for our minds, is
Yeah.
what I'm Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that, and that is definitely an area where it can be just as challenging. Like you said, like for people to start in the gym, there's like this whole like, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing. So I definitely want to point people towards some good resources so they can build on those skills. You mentioned your Substack, which I was definitely going to plug at the end, and I'll throw the link down in the description so everyone should go check Jennifer's Substack out. I enjoy reading them. They're like pretty quick reads, and like very accessible, not overly complicated the way you write it out. So I've been a big fan of reading the Substack. Can you tell people a little bit more about how to find it, where to get it, and what it's about?
Yeah. Yeah. So Substack, and just to say, my Substack is completely free. So
Mm.
if you follow or subscribe, the Substack is called Thrive Mind. And that my audience is a general audience. I talk about, like last week, I talked a lot about, just the challenges of, academic research. That's not probably quite as, academic research when it comes to LGBTQ population. But the week before that, I talked about men's mental health because, June is Men's Mental Health Month. And men are more at risk for suicide, than women. And I am a suicidologist, so I study suicide and ways to prevent it. And but yeah, so Substack, Thrive Mind. You can also just Google my name, Jennifer Wright-Berryman. You can find, and Substack, you can find it that way. I also have a website, jenniferwrightberryman.com, and all my information is there. You can find a link to my Substack there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I try to make, my newsletters just for a general audience. I want to make some mental health stuff accessible to people. And I want to remove barriers to mental wellness. So that's why I write.
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely tell in your tone. It's a really good Substack. I think you all should check it out. Do you have any other like recommendations in terms of like books or other good sources that you like to refer people toward as they're working on their mental muscle as well as their physical capabilities?
Yeah, definitely. Growth. Well, it's called Growth Mindset, but the book is called Mindset by Carol
Mm-hmm.
Dweck. She's that's a pretty popular one. I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned earlier Grit
Mm-hmm.
by Angela Duckworth. Um, I really like Emotional First Aid
Mm-hmm.
by, his name is Guy Winch, Winch. It's an older book, but it's really relevant to a general audience when you're talking about, just feelings and how to work through them. And I also would recommend for, in terms of mental health literacy and emotional health literacy, Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown is a pretty good read. Some of her stuff I really like, some of it I would challenge, but I think that goes along with, just about. But I also think books on connection and belongingness. Um, for me, there's a couple on my shelf. Um, Belonging by Jeffrey Cohen, Tribe by Sebastian Younger.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though you're working on your personal goals, your fitness, you're the only one who can make yourself fit.
Mm-hmm.
I think a support system is crucial and critical to our mental wellness. So whether that's your friends, your family, your gym people, your non-gym people, keeping yourself dialed into your support system um, is going to sustain you emotionally and physically.
Yeah.
So
Well,
those are a
awesome.
few recommendations.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I will link all the books down below. You'll find a plethora of links in this episode. So I hope you all go check them out. At least, read over a couple and check out one. I think that'd be a good actionable goal for everybody after this podcast. Um, well, definitely. Any other closing thoughts or final takeaways for the people before we let them go?
I just want to say that I'm grateful to spend this time with you,
Mm.
and I'm grateful to all of your audience and your listeners who spent some time listening to this episode,
Mhm.
because that's an acknowledgement by itself that mental health is important, and that health by itself incorporates both your mind and your body, and you can't have one without the other. So
Yeah.
kudos to your listeners.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. I appreciate everybody for staying locked in this far into the episode. I think, yeah, like that's just such an important thing is like we talk on the Trainer Scoop a lot about the physical side, but I can only stress so much. Like the mental health side is equally as important, if not more important, arguably. But they're both very, very important for your overall well-being. So I hope everybody enjoyed it and got a lot out of the episode. Definitely appreciate your time, Jennifer. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your Sunday to come on and talk and get all these good resources over to the people. So I know you have Instagram, as I've tagged your handle here. If anybody's watching on Spotify or YouTube, you'll see Jen L. Berry on Instagram. So go follow, check out the Thrive Mind Substack. Is there any other things you'd want to shout out to the people? Any other things you're particularly proud of that you think can be helpful?
Oh my gosh.
You do a lot. You do a lot.
I do a lot of stuff. I think what you've already mentioned is probably a good place to start. There is no other Jennifer Wright-Berryman in the world that I have found. So if anyone just Googles my name, they could probably pull up some of my research papers if they're interested in those.
Mm-hmm.
I've written a couple of books, but those are unrelated to
Mm-hmm.
to this conversation.
If you're
So
interested in the books, shoot me a message. We'll hook it up.
there you go. I've got some free copies I can send people.
There we go. Awesome. Well,
Awesome.
I will let you go. I'll let the audience get on to the next thing they decide to listen to. But to everybody that's listening, I really appreciate you for tuning in and staying with us this long. If you're watching, feel free to like the video and subscribe and leave comments if you have any questions or just want to show Jennifer your kudos for her taking time. If you're on any of the podcasting platforms, always appreciate a little review. Helps bump us in the algorithm so we can get this information out to the people. And like I said, guys, please go show your support to Jennifer. Show her that you care, that she took time out of her busy Sunday away from the pool to come talk to us. Jennifer, thanks again. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, David.
All righty, everybody. Well, this has been it for episode 91. We'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.